He's a Midwestern. So for us here in the Midwest, he's somebody who knows our church, who knows what being a Catholic is like here in the Midwest.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for News 4 at 6. I'm Matt Breen. Jessica Bowman has the night off. 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide have a pope tonight, and for the first time ever, he's an American. Shortly after noon today, Robert Prevost was announced as the 267th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, taking the name Leo XIV. The new pope was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1955. He has a math degree from Villanova University and then joined the Order of St. Augustine after deciding to become a priest. As an Augustinian, he moved to Peru in 1985 and spent 14 years there before becoming the head of the worldwide Augustinian order. He returned to Peru as a bishop in 2014 before his appointment to head the dicastery of bishops in the Vatican in 2023. He speaks 5 languages and reads 2 others. This afternoon, as the world waited to learn the identity of the next pope, the new bishop of the Diocese of Sioux City waited right along with them. Bishop John Keener was at the diocesan offices in a board meeting. It's a meeting he suspended so he could watch Pope Leo XIV introduce himself to the world. Bishop Keener, Pope Leo XIV said in his opening remarks in St. Peter's Square that God loves everyone, evil will not prevail. That sounds like a continuation of the message of Pope Francis, his predecessor.
I would agree, and it's very consistent with the Christian message throughout the millennia, that God loves everyone and that evil will not prevail because Christ is risen from the dead.
When you listened to his remarks, what sense did you get of the kind of pope that he will be?
A pope who will work to bring hope to the world, a pope who will work to proclaim the message of God's love, as you just said, a pope who will be not just a pope for a few, but for all, and one who calls all into relationship with Jesus, which is all of our goal.
Since you were ordained a priest, you have seen several popes, Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Francis. Is there a comparison to be made for Pope Leo XIV to any of the other popes that you have seen?
You know, I'm not sure yet. I think certainly the surprise, I'm not sure the world was surprised when Pope Benedict was elected. I certainly wasn't. The world was in shock when Pope John Paul II was elected. And I think the world was kind of in shock when Pope Francis was elected too, the first non-European, although he is of Italian descent, the first pope from the Americas, the first pope from the Western Hemisphere, and now we have another pope from the Americas, from the Western Hemisphere. Again, someone who spent a good part of his ministry in Latin America, specifically in Peru.
In the last month, Bishop Keener told me he received 2 letters from Pope Leo, who then was Cardinal Robert Prevost. One welcomed Keener to the College of Bishops, and the second one insisted Keener attend what Keener called Bishop School in Rome in September. The announcement of the new pope was met with jubilation in Rome and enthusiasm from Catholics all around the world. We wanted to get the reaction to that news right here in Siouxland. KTIV's Connor Trett joins us live tonight outside St. Michael Catholic Church on Sioux City's north side. So Connor, what did you hear when you talked to people about today's announcement from the Vatican?
Well, Matt, from what I got, a lot of the people that I spoke with are very excited about Pope Leo XIV's selection. I was able to spend the afternoon over at Briarcliff University, and I spoke to members of the faculty and the student body about where they were when they heard the announcement, their reaction to him being an American, and just their hope for the future of Pope Leo XIV.
I was actually in the maintenance shop. I work part-time in the maintenance department here at BCU, and I was in the break room, and I was actually just watching the live stream until when I found out that we've got a new pope, which I was really excited for. It was awesome.
I was watching Vatican News in English online, watching and waiting for white smoke when I saw there was white smoke, I headed across campus and see if we could get it set up in the cafeteria at Briarcliff, and also put an email out to the community.
I thought it was going to be until like next week or something. There were, you know, it was going to be conflicting from different ideas within the church, but yeah, it's awesome that we were able to get one pope real quick.
It was absolutely surprising and exciting to find that we had the first American pope, and also encouraging that it is someone from Chicago, from the Midwest. Those of us who are from the Midwest probably have some sensibilities about what that means, and that's exciting.
So the southwest suburb of Chicago, so it's awesome to see someone that is from the Chicagoland area to be Pope, which I think is an amazing thing. I've got some rooted pride from that.
We'll get to hear more from other members of the Siouxland community about Pope Leo XIV's election tonight on KTIV News 4 at 10. But for now, that's all I've got from here. Matt, back to you.
Connor Tread outside St. Michael Catholic Church in Sioux City for us tonight. Connor, thank you.